Alright guys, today we're going to be reacting to the European freedom that is illegal in the United States. Okay, let me just get ready. And let's just jump in.
Oh, give me a home where the buffalo roam, where the
Oh, that's beautiful.
deer and the antelope
Beautiful.
play, where seldom is heard
This land is mine!
a discouraging word.
This is my land! I make the laws here.
And the
That looks
skies
beautiful,
are
folks.
not cloudy all day.
One popular walkway to the sand is now marked off as private property. But the question is, should it be? Should it be? Should it be?
In many countries in Europe, there exists a fundamental right to roam, an ancient custom that allows anyone to wander an open countryside, whether the land is privately or publicly owned. In fact, Sweden is so proud of the fact that its natural lands are accessible to everyone that the Swedish Tourism Board famously listed the entire country on Airbnb in 2017. Gorgeous photos of riverbanks, forest glens, and rocky beaches, beckoning users to experience the countryside. And it's all completely free of charge, thanks to a freedom granted by the Constitution of Sweden called Allemansrätten, or every man's right. But coming from the United States, where no trespassing signs, fences, and boundaries that effectively say, this land is my land, not your land, well, the concept in Europe seems a little bit outlandish.
Because it's a concept of private property in the United States. There's nothing else we can do. That's how we roll over here. We have public land. I can go to public land. I don't need permission. When it comes down to private land, you have to respect it. That's how it is. There's a huge difference when it comes down to the United States and Europe. We do things very different, folks. We're not the same. We are. I'm very not into the government. The government for me is not my best friend. Don't like to pay high taxes, and I like my private property. I like it, and I respect private property. We have land to just walk all over the country. We have. It's just dangerous. It's very dangerous. You can walk. Hey, there's land over here in Wisconsin. You can walk with no permission. Go ahead, walk. Good luck. Good luck. That thing is dangerous, man. Dangerous, dangerous. But when it comes down to private property, before we start the video, it's the fundamental of being American. Buying your house, having your own land where you can protect. You can have your own family, and don't let anybody trespass it. And there's a new age of American that they don't think like that. That they think like you should just buy a house and you have a land that they can just jump in and do things. No. That's the only thing that I disagree when it comes down to Europe and the United States. And it's not a disagreement of taste. It's just a way of life, right? It's like, if like telling some people from the native countries, right? Right. Even here in the United States, our native reservation, they have based on the Constitution of the United States, there's some laws that protect them, and they like the way they do things. They love it. That's it, right? It's just that's why we built this country, because we didn't want to be Europe. As simple as that. A lot of people don't understand that. We don't want to be Europe. We love Europe. I love Europe. I've been there many times. Love it. Love the culture. Love the food. Love the people, right? But I would not live there. I would not live there. And no offense for you guys, but I would not live there. Love the food. I went to Italy, have a great, amazing time. Amazing. Enjoyed it. But I would not live there. It's just my personal preference.
To say the least. So why do Europeans see access to nature as a basic human right? But Americans view the wild frontier as largely off limits. Where do property rights end and human rights begin? Well, let's take a look.
She's making the argument.
and the
Rights and human rights.
skies are not
That's a big
cloudy all day.
That's beautiful.
The right to roam, also known as the freedom to roam, is an ancient custom that allows anyone to wander in the open countryside, whether the land is privately or publicly owned. In countries such as Norway, Sweden, Estonia,
That's
and
beautiful.
Scotland,
Wow.
it has existed as a common right, a defining concept of nationhood, and has only recently been codified into law. Although the names and specifics vary by country, the concept is relatively the same. The general public is granted non-motorized access to certain public or private lands for responsible recreational use.
And you tell me this is basically in Europe, it would make sense. For me, it will make sense in Europe. Why is that? Well, it's a hundreds of thousands of years tradition. It makes sense. It's a different way of life. It makes sense. And folks, as an American, I'm gonna just react to this video as how I feel and how I see things. I cannot lie to you guys. If you want me to lie and just give you an opinion that you guys are looking for, I'm not gonna do that. This is not the channel for that.
One may travel through
That's beautiful.
by foot, ski, horse, bike, or boat, as well as forage and sometimes even fish on uncultivated lands without the landowner's explicit permission. Camping for 1 or 2 nights is permissible even in some countries, provided the user does not camp within close proximity of the landowner's home or in their gardens or on agricultural areas. Although, fair warning, economic pursuits like fishing, hunting, or foraging for goods that you plan on selling, as well as activities that could harm the land, like lighting fires, are generally not allowed, although there might be some exceptions from
Okay, that's interesting. So campfire in the wild are generally forbidden from April 15, September 15 in Norway. Why?
one country to
Why is
another.
that?
And those who roam may not disturb or
yeah.
damage wildlife or crops, refrain from making too much noise,
Look at that.
and are expected to pick up all their
That looks clean. Like I'm guessing there's animal, there's wildlife over there, right? But I don't know how dangerous it is to do this, right? Here in the United States, it's dangerous, folks. It's there's land that you can literally go without permission here. You can literally climb mountains if you want to. I was in New Hampshire. I went hiking for hours. I didn't have to ask for permission. Just do it and that's it. I can go there at 5 in the morning if I want to, right? But it's dangerous, folks. I'm telling you, dangerous. And I'm telling you, I'm from Puerto Rico. I used to hike all over the land of Puerto Rico. All over. And when I came here to start hiking, it's crazy. It's crazy.
their trash, leaving the area in better condition than it was found.
That's
And
cool.
with this freedom to roam, nature isn't really treated like a museum piece, something that should be experienced from afar or behind a barbed wire fence. Instead, it becomes something to be
Wow.
deeply immersed in, a multisensory, tangible experience whose smells, sounds, sights can have a profound effect upon the minds of their beholders.
Yeah.
And there's a long-term
Ooh,
effect
look at
too.
that. Wow.
Nature is no longer relegated to occasional visits, but instead becomes a part of people's everyday routine, woven into their lives, helping to relieve stress and promoting mental and physical health. But what I think is so fascinating about many countries' right to roam laws is that in some of these countries, it wasn't even a law in the first place.
It's a culture,
Fundamentally,
that's
the
what I'm
right
saying,
to roam.
Thousands of years of culture, it makes sense. Thousands of years of culture, everybody understand each other. Let's just go with it. That's not how in the United States. Oh man.
Arises from the
You have people for different areas of the world. I mean, I cannot see it. I can putting this kind of concept here in the United States is like, hey, you have private property, but you can cross it if you want to. I cannot see that happening. If we have like a culture like this, like Europe, right? Like something like collectively, like Europe. You can negotiate, I guess, right? But the concept of private property is so innate in the American dream, right? Make sure you have your house, your little fence with a kid, wife picket fence, and I love that concept. And again, I don't want government to be around me, kind of thing. So I just want to be left alone.
Principle of
I'm
nulla
just giving you like
poena
a little
sine
hint
lega,
of,
which means what
you know.
is not illegal cannot be punished. Things that are not
Oh my God,
explicitly
beautiful.
disallowed are allowed by default. That's why today the right to roam has survived in perhaps its purest form in Estonia, Finland, Iceland,
That's
Norway,
beautiful,
and
my
Sweden.
goodness, look at
But the
that.
freedom to
Wow.
roam didn't always exist. And in some countries, it's a freedom that many are still fighting for. Take
Really?
England, for example. Almost a third of England's land is still owned by the aristocracy. And 1 in 8 UK households don't even have access to a garden, a statistic that rises to 1 in 5 in London. And many of these aristocratic estates are the product of a 1,000-year history of enclosure, the theft of land that had been previously held in common. Entire villages were forcibly evicted so that land could be subsumed into large estates and adapted for agricultural use and private profit. So that's why in April of 1932, hundreds of ramblers from Manchester and Sheffield set off for the highest points in the peaks. They were intending to highlight the gross unfairness of the severely limited rights to access an outstandingly beautiful area of country which was rarely farmed by its wealthy aristocratic owner, but instead kept only for occasional hunting and game shooting. The walk would go down in history as the Kinder Scout mass trespass of 1932, named after the Moorland Plateau,
That's beautiful.
and would later be seen as a seminal moment in the struggle for public access to private land. And even outside of England, there are still major landowners in Norway, counts in Sweden, lords in Scotland who own many hundreds of thousands of acres. But the difference in these countries is that their ownership of the land. However, while it does allow them to take rent, mine, and make money from the land, it does not include the right to exclude every other member of the public. In these countries, the right to roam is so fundamentally ingrained in the health and well-being of the nation that the right to roam supersedes any exclusionary tendencies of private property law. Instead, every person has the right to explore these vast open spaces, in some cases even to sleep there, to kayak, swim, climb, ride horses, and cycle. In 2000, England did
So what if let's say this is my private properties and I start building houses there? Can they still go and camp? If I start just building apartment units, this apartment unit there's now, protection, there's a guard, there's people living there. Can they still set up a camp and sleep there? I'm just asking, right? Because I'm new to, European law. I have no idea. And this is a genuine question.
pass the Countryside and Rights of Way, or the Crow Act, which gave a partial right to roam over about 8% of England. For the last 2 decades, they have had legal access to walk over certain landscapes, mountain moor commons and some downland and coastlines, without the fear of trespassing. But these sites are often remote, meaning that access to land has become a postcode lottery, available to those who live next to it, or who can afford the cost of travel and overnight
It's very
stays.
far away.
But here in Germany, the right to roam is more robust than what currently exists in England, but is quite a bit more limited than what you see in Northern Europe. Because here in Germany, the right to roam, also known as Betretungsrecht, is guaranteed by multiple federal laws. Most notably the Federal Nature Conservation Act, the Federal Forest Act, and the Federal Water Management Act that
When we're talking about federal act, are we talking about the European Union? Help me out here, guys. Who's the federal agency here? Is it Germany federal state or the European Union federal state? You see what I'm saying? You guys can answer that question for me. That'll be great.
collectively allow everyone access to the open landscape, uncultivated land, forests, and bodies of water, including cycling and horse riding on tracks and paths.
Wow.
However, unlike Northern Europe, free camping is strictly forbidden in Germany. But that being said, the Constitution of Bavaria guarantees everyone the right of enjoyment of natural beauty and recreation in the outdoors, in particular the access to forests and mountain meadows, the use of waterways and lakes, and
I don't know if these pictures are from Germany, but that'll be interesting. Why?
the appropriation of wild fruits and edibles. That right is actually nicknamed Schwammerparagraph, or the mushroom clause. But the article also obliges every person to treat nature and the landscape with care. And I think that's really a major point, because at its core, the right to roam is about both equality and environmentalism. Two things that, well, frankly, haven't always been so easy to come by in the United States. The right to roam assures that outdoor recreation.
I didn't even understand what you said. So that sounds kind of California thing. I don't know.
Recreational activities are permitted wherever they are not explicitly implied. But in the United States, the opposite holds true. And that's something that I find somewhat surprising given just how vast and also how young the United States is as a nation. After all, the American story is one of the Wild West, exploration and adventure. And perhaps no single story in our entire history is more emboldened by this uncharted frontier than the frontiersmen and women themselves. The American prairie was a vast and uncharted expanse of tall, tough grasses and land suitable for nomads, not settlers. It had long been the territory of the Native Americans, and the prairie was an unbounded space, more like an ocean than a stretch of arable land. But after the passage of the Homestead Act of 1862, those looking to stake a claim for themselves pushed west. The cowboys roamed free, herding cattle over the boundless plains. But those settlers needed fences, not least to keep those free-roaming cattle from trampling their crops. And there wasn't.
But have you been in Wyoming, lady? I cannot believe she's saying this. Have you been in Wyoming? I used to live in Wyoming. I don't know what she's talking about. There's literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles of just plain landscape of no houses around public property that you can, if you want to, you can walk. If you want to, you can walk all you want. Well, good luck with the coyotes and mountain lions and all that shit. Like she's talking like these places are like, nice, freely like the settlers came here and destroyed everything. No, that's not. This is not these kind of lands. These are not this kind of lands. And you can, if you want to, just travel all the way from New York to all the way to Wyoming. Good luck. That shit is dangerous, man. Dangerous. We have beautiful. Listen. Washington State, Oregon, Montana, North, South Dakota, even here in Wisconsin. Beautiful places to just hike if you want to. Well, some of these places, I'm telling you, folks, they're not. When I see those little videos about Europe, I'm like, oh my God, I just want to go and just hike that. The closest thing I can think about is the Northeast, where you have a more concentrated wildlife, right? That we're walking around, there's not a bear that's going to get me or something like that, right? But a lot of these lands, this southern Midwest, you don't wanna just go to a trail and start walking around those places. And a lot of these places are not. A lot of these places are owned by the federal government, which means you can walk and you can camp if you want to. But why you wanna go to your neighbor to just camp when you have all this land that is just literally just there for you to camp? I don't know what she's talking about. She's talking about very minute kind of guys that just own some property and all of a sudden he don't want some hitchhiker to sleep with his cat. But makes sense. I mean, you have this thousands and thousands of miles just of land. Just go over there. This is how
a lot of wood.
I'm telling you because I live around the country in different states. I live in Puerto Rico, Wyoming, New York, Wisconsin. I travel in Connecticut. I've been around the country. And private property is something that is very sacred. But when it comes down to when it says public property, you can just jump around. You can throw a camp. You can do whatever you want, basically. Because for you guys to understand, the federal government does own a lot of the properties in the east side of the country, right? Because of course the 13 colonies. That's where it started. As soon as I start moving mid and west, that's federal government. There's not even states on some of those properties, some of those lands. So you can literally just walk there and just do whatever the hell you want. Well, good luck. Good luck with the wildlife. There's river. There's a lot of things, but good luck with that.
Certainly none to spare for fencing in mile after mile of what was often called the American desert. Farmers tried growing thorn bush hedges, but they were slow growing and inflexible. Smooth wire fences didn't work either, as the cattle simply pushed through them. So for much of the early American West, private ownership of land wasn't really all that common because it really wasn't all that feasible.
Well, it's still not common. There's too much land. There's people owning houses, of course, but there's so much land that the federal government is literally, how can I say this? They're begging people to buy that. Begging. That's how much land there are.
But then along came barbed wire, and it changed what the Homestead Act could not. The homesteading farmers were trying to stake out their property that had once been the territory of various Native American tribes.
Native American, that they thought that they owned the land. This is the same thing, man. Come on now. I don't want to get into this Native American stuff, man. Love the culture. It's part of the American culture, but they will give you the same argument, right? That's our land, and that's why we have reservations.
No wonder these tribes called barbed wire the devil's rope. The old-time cowboys also lived on the principle that cattle could graze freely across the plains. This was the law of the open range, and the cowboys hated the wire. Cattle would get nasty wounds and infections, and when the blizzards came, the cattle would try to head south, and sometimes they got stuck against the wire and died in the thousands. However, other cowmen did adopt barbed wire, using it to fence off huge private ranches. And while barbed wire could enforce legal boundaries, many fences were actually illegal. Attempts to commandeer common land for private purposes. But it's certainly true that modern economies are built on the legal fact that most things, including land and property, have an owner, usually a person or a corporation. And the ability to own private property also gives people an incentive to invest in and improve what they own, whether that's a patch of land in the American Midwest or an apartment in New York City. And it's
that area of the country, that southern Midwest, Wyoming, Colorado, Wyoming, Nevada, Utah, all that area, man, that's a hard land. That's a hard land to live. That state, Wyoming is bigger some of the state from Europe, folks. Wyoming is big state. It's dangerous. It's a state that is very dangerous. And in the cold weather, in October it gets below 0 Fahrenheit. Every year there's people dying in the winter. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Powerful argument. It was ruthlessly and cynically deployed by those who wanted to argue that, hey, Native Americans didn't really have a right to their own territory because they weren't actively developing it in a style that the Europeans saw.
No, they have a war. They lost it. That's how they did it. Post-Civil War, and before Civil War, that's why they call it the Wild West. Whoever, they listen. I don't like when these are Americans lying. I just don't like this. They put in Native Americans like they're these little angels. These people were just humans with intentions. And I've been around Native Americans that are being around. I know their history. They were not the angels. They're not. They're just humans with intentions, like anyone else, like everybody have. in their own country. And they were having their own scuffles, man. You know, Caucasians and and Native Americans used to buy a lot of slaves. They were the second greatest buyer of slaves in the United States were Native Americans. So that means that they were recognizing the concept of property because they were buying slaves. That means that they understood and were adopting the European model, because the European model was that if I buy it, it's my property, so I own it. So the natives said the same thing. You know what? If I have money, I can buy some slaves. Yeah, they put. I don't like when Americans lie. They just don't like it.
Fit. So the story how barbed wire changed the West is also very much a story of how property rights have transformed the modern world. I mean, absolutely. The Homestead Act very much laid out who owned what in the new Western territories. But those laws couldn't really be enforced until fences entered into the conversation. And so today, Americans still live with a pretty rigid definition and delineation of what is mine versus yours. Quite literally. We preach the notion that good fences make good neighbors, and resultingly, the majority of the US landscape is unknown to the general public because by law of trespass, we're banned from setting foot on it in the first place. We're excluded from millions of acres of open space, woodland, meadows, rivers.
That's not true. Why are you saying that? That's not true. You can literally just, if it is a public park, you don't need federal or state permission. I just don't understand these. Well, it's a private property, you can, but it's a federal or public park, you can literally do it. If you can do it in New York City, which is, like, oh my God. Listen, I know these are Americans with good intentions, right? But I don't like the concept, because I don't think Europe and the United States, one is not better than the other. I don't believe in that. I believe they're both different countries with different models. But I don't like these common Americans that go to different countries that start everything around the world is better than America. I don't like that, because that means that they're biased towards an opinion. Now, of course, I'm just giving my opinion regarding this, but I'm coming from an opinion of being truthful. I'm okay just criticizing my country up and down. I have to. If I want a better country, I have to criticize it. But this notion that federal property, right, this open, folks, open, right, that you cannot go, is nonsense. Good luck doing that. It's dangerous. It's dangerous to go by yourself, right? I would not suggest it. I would never. If you want to do it, go ahead, but I would not suggest it. But there's a freedom to do so. Now, if it is private property, you're not. But if it's a public property, if it's a federal property, you can, all you want. National parks, all you want. All you want. It's dangerous as hell, man. It's dangerous, folks. She's not even mentioning that, how dangerous it is. It's not dangerous. It's like we have grizzly bears here. We have black bears, man. We have a wolf. Wisconsin has wolf that has coyote. I mean, I don't know how to explain it, man. Even myself, I can't even fathom how I will go to those woods, man.
And their banks, simply because existing laws of ownership prioritize private property rights and not the accessibility of nature to the public. Today in the United States, roughly 60% of land is privately owned, either by individuals or corporations. The remaining 40% is owned by federal, state, or local governments. The majority...
Let me see that map one more time. I saw a different map, but this is the one that she's showing. You see all this land right here? You see all this land here? Doesn't look like a lot. This is the state of Wyoming she was talking, Colorado, all this stuff. All this shit right here, man. That thing is dangerous. Dangerous. Now, you see right here, this green right here? A lot of these states own their land, right? So the federal government doesn't own the land, but the state does. Now, you have to check what's the regulation for each state, like you guys, like Europe. Each country has their own regulations, right? But even here, I'm in Wisconsin, right? This is Wisconsin right here. If I can get closer to that, I don't know. Some of these areas right here, it's enough for you to just hike. It's enough. But even me, I would not even hike it. That's the crazy thing. Like, it's so dangerous. You have it's all these places, and I would even, and this is me, right? A lot of these places, you don't even need the permission of the state government to just do so. You don't know. You just go there. They probably have like probably the state owns it, right? And probably will say like Park B or Park National Park from the state of Minnesota, and then you just go there, right? Now, because we have something called private property, we love private property. If it is private property, you cannot do it.
60% of land is privately owned, either by individuals or corporations.
Alaska,
The remaining 40% is owned by federal, state, or local governments. The majority of those public lands are administered by the United States Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management, whose agencies of the federal government include about 640 million acres of land, about 28% of the total land area of 2.27 billion acres.
Yeah.
Any person, including non-citizens, can legally access and recreate on these lands lawfully, sometimes referred to as the North American.
That's right. But why you need more land than that? I just don't get it. That's the argument that we've been just discussing here, right? You put in the video like there's no plan here to just go forward. That's why I'm having this little ramble.
Model of land conservation. But some cities and local governments put more restrictive covenances on those public lands, whether it's through loitering or redlining or outright banning certain groups of individuals from accessing public lands
Certain groups of individuals, I want to hear that.
altogether. In St. Louis, Missouri, for example, the government banishes many unhoused people and other vulnerable populations from large areas of the city. These are areas that include public land, and many of the organizations...
Lady, because they're infecting the areas. Man, why you have to be like this? They're literally infecting the areas and putting all the people in dangers. You guys from Germany, would you guys be okay with that? Would you guys be okay with that? No, right? These people are... Man, this double logic.
...that provide shelter, meals, and care to...
They have shelters. Everywhere.
...to St. Louis's homeless population.
St. Louis have a lot.
Those who violate the orders have been jailed for months. And just like it was in the early days of the American frontier, in the United States...
What are you supposed to do with the homeless people, man? Just let them take your beautiful city? I don't get it.
Knowing who owns what land is incredibly important because land ownership affects how wealth is distributed nationally, as well as how land is used. Access to land is deeply biased against large sections of our society. 200 years ago, the working class were still intrinsically connected to the countryside. Even as late as the 1930s, rambling and cycling were seen as primarily working class hobbies, accompanied by a strong understanding that nature was needed to counteract the hard, cramped lifestyles of urban dwelling. Only very recently has the countryside become the preserve of the middle and upper classes. From country club memberships to outdoor recreation shops, the leisure industry dominates our access to the countryside. Now even the experience of nature has become something you can purchase, a commodity for those who can afford it. And I'm not just talking about
Deer Park, Utah. Why you have to mention Utah? I think it's so expensive over there. It's beautiful state.
Hiking paths or horseback riding trails. Half of the population of the U.S. lives within 50 miles of the coast, but 70% of coastal land is privately owned. And their percentage is increasing all the time. And fences, boundaries, and private...
Because the government is very inefficient, lady. The government of the United States is very inefficient. Why she's throwing these half statements without telling the truth? Tell the truth. The government of the United States is very inefficient. right? This is compared to Europe. Europe government is more efficient, right? They have a more efficient way to handle their own things, to clean their own land. There's some pride. The government in the United States is very inefficient, folks. Yeah, that's why you have tents in the city, because they're very inefficient.
Property laws manifest a number of tensions between exclusionary aspirations rooted in fear and protection of privilege and the values of civic responsibility, between the trend towards privatization of public services and the
Yeah, because they keep things clean. You understand? They keep things clean and organized because they have some profit. The United States government cannot do it. They can't do it. Have you seen New York City? Have you seen Boston? Have you seen Minneapolis? Have you seen Los Angeles? Man, I don't like these kind of arguments. It's because the government is very inefficient. Very inefficient. I would never trust one bit of my government. They're inefficient.
ideals of public good and general welfare.
Look at that. Look at that private property. That looks beautiful. They probably have a HRO and probably they have night watch. Nobody commits a crime. If someone commit a crime, they're gonna be faster than the police. This is why we have these houses. This is what the United States is all about communities. Community, they gather together, and they make a community, and they protect each other before the government, because the government is very inefficient.
And between the need for personal and community control of the environment and the perceived dangers of making outsiders of fellow citizens. So, in the absence of right to roam laws, the United States has kind of swung wildly in the opposite direction, with increasingly deadly consequences.
65-year-old man in upstate New York is facing murder charges after he allegedly shot and killed a woman who authorities say accidentally turned into his driveway. Kevin Monahan.
Because in most states, the property line, not the entrance of the home, is the boundary for trespassing, and trespassing is considered a criminal offense. In the US, you are allowed to use physical force.
That's not true. Not in New York State. See, no, you can't in New York State. Maybe Georgia. Not even in Georgia now with the last case. Right, South Carolina, Tennessee, yeah. But in New York, you can't. You cannot shoot someone with the trespassing. You will be in jail. You can't.
Against a trespasser if you reasonably believe that it is necessary to prevent criminal interference with
So you wait for them to commit the crime and then ask questions? I'm not naive, folks.
your property. And in 45 states with castle doctrine laws, you can actually use deadly force if you reasonably believe that it is necessary to protect yourself or
What you're supposed to do? Not to? Are you doing the argument that you're not supposed to protect yourself in the United States, where you have criminals with guns?
someone else from the imminent use of
You should call the police first. All right.
deadly physical force or to prevent the commission of a dangerous felony.
Oh, let him just steal everything, and then after he steals everything, right? You don't do anything. The reason I'm telling this because I have a very interesting story to tell you guys. My car got stolen, right? And I found that I was in a supermarket, burned out completely. And the police didn't do anything. Can you do that in Europe? No. You know, they probably have a better security than here. And it was from Wisconsin. A lot of these liberals live in Milwaukee. Because you see them all the time. The way they just make laws and stuff like that. There's an agenda here. I don't want to get into this, but there's an agenda. And the thing is that a lot of these things that she's talking about, that she likes to do, it's called the cities in the United States. They don't work. They do not work at all. And I will, if you guys ask me, okay, Pablo, where should I not go in the United States? I will say, do not go to any city in the United States. Zero cities. Do not go to the cities. You're going to have a bad experience. Because these kind of policies that she's saying are implemented. They don't work at all. Our government is very inefficient. Very inefficient. And I don't want nothing to happen to you guys.
such as arson or burglary. Now, I should give a giant disclaimer here. The use of deadly force has to be appropriate, justifiable, and proportional to the threat.
Wow, how do you do that?
And I
How do you do that? It's a criminal.
get that that can be somewhat open to interpretation, but legally speaking, it has to be justifiable.
Get off my lawn.
So, despite what Hollywood movies and signs like this might lead you to believe, it is in fact entirely illegal to set up a booby trap on your property that could injure or kill trespassers.
So they can just trespass you with the intention to just hurt your family, and they can go to court and just win against you. I'm telling you, folks, some of these liberal policies, they're just going crazy. Again,
You guys give up, or you're thirsty for more?
And in fact, the courts have actually upheld rulings that even make firing a warning shot illegal, since this still amounts to lethal force beyond what is reasonably necessary. But
I don't think that's like that anymore in Florida. I think you can literally just shoot the guy, right? If you think that the person's trespassing, and just threaten your family, you can shoot.
fear that you could be injured or even killed for walking onto a property when you're not really sure who it
That's not true, lady. Oh my God, this is not true at all. You're just exaggerating a lot.
belongs to is so
You're exaggerating a lot, right? Of course, you go to someone's house, probably it's gonna happen, right? But if you go, anybody, big houses, there's private property here, and I walk close to the private property or touch some of the parking lot, nothing's gonna happen.
pervasive in the American psyche. That speaking from personal experience, it's definitely kept me from walking in an open field because I really wasn't sure who it belonged
Really?
to. And
Really, that's the reason why. That's the reason why. So it's not that there's no open field to walk in. It's just that American psyche.
this fear isn't unfounded. It's worth mentioning that some states, in order to quell this fear, have passed laws that do provide for some limited forms of public access to private lands. For example, in some western states, such as Montana and Colorado, people
beautiful.
can access certain types of public lands, such as rivers and streams, by crossing private lands without trespassing. Other states, such as Maine and Vermont,
beautiful.
have passed right to roam laws that allow people to access certain types of private lands, such as coastal areas and abandoned railroad beds for recreational
Or
purposes.
hiking mountains.
However, these laws are often incredibly unclear, and they vary significantly from one municipality to the next. And so this fear of not being able to really fully enjoy all of the outdoors, especially even
All of the outdoors, man. Hey, I love my country, but I'm not that stupid. I'm not gonna go to the forest. You don't even know what the hell's going on in the forest. I'm not going there. I'm not going there. I have a couple friends that used to go to Colorado, to the mountains of Colorado, just to find themselves and all shit. And they encounter grizzly bears, man, all the time. Can you hike like that? Can you hike knowing there's just bears and moaning right at night when you're sleeping? Yep. Okay. Yeah. Listen, folks. My opinion of this. That's fine. I'm okay with her opinion, her experience. That's fine. I think both countries, they have different. Well, I don't know if European Union is a country. Like mostly like Europe, right? I think it's good to think that you guys have got a good thing happening for yourself. Very good. The way you guys keep your landscape, your Rome tradition, I think that's amazing. United States right now, I would not even recommend that shit. First of all, it's dangerous as hell. It's dangerous, folks. Dangerous. It's very dangerous. I mean, as dangerous as you're not coming home, kind of dangerous. I mean, there's beautiful places to go around. You can hike. You don't have to pay anything. You can go miles and miles. You'll be fine. Um, but you guys have to be careful. Some of these Americans that put the United States down for some personal reasons that I'm not gonna discuss. Some I'm not saying they're lying, right? But they tell a different story, right? Different stories. And I'm the most critical when it comes down to the United. As an American, I'm very critical from what we stand for. Sometimes the way our government do things, I'm super critical. I don't trust my government at all. But we have good things here, very good things. And I think as an American, I like to just appreciate all the cultures. I don't like the thing about Americans just go to different cultures. You go to Japan, everything in Japan is better than the United States. They go to Russia, everything in Russia is better than the United States. They go to Mexico, everything in Mexico is better than the United States. They go to what else? Any part of the world that say these things, right? I would suggest not to take it with a pickle salt. I've been around the world. I've been in Ukraine. I've been in Bulgaria. I've been in Italy. I've been in England. I've been in in Germany as well, right? I've been in a lot of places in the world. I'm planning to travel to Asia, and I appreciate the culture much. I enjoy the culture, and I bring that to the United States, and I try to be a better American, right? But I'm never putting myself in a position that American's better. America's not better. We have a lot of things that we need to work on. I would suggest to just be careful with people like this, right? They're doing these things and they throwing a little bit of politics to the side that you can tell. And talking about Native Americans as being these angelical people. No, they're just humans like anybody else. And they have their good and bad things. We have to be very careful with that. That's my opinion, folks. I'm just here rambling a little bit, but I think, and I stopped a couple times because I wanted to just let you guys know because I don't like this. I don't like a lot of these bad faith things to just give you guys a different impression that you guys in Europe is much better than no. It's not. It's not like that, folks. It's not like that. You guys have a good something good happening in your countries, and I'm glad. And we have something here happening in America that is good. And there's a lot of things that are bad as well. So, in the case of the private property, we love private property. We love private property, and we're not ashamed of that. We love it. We love it. We don't like We don't like public property. Actually, it's all shitty, so we don't like it. But in your case, in Europe, the public system is beautiful. I mean, you guys keep things so nice and neat. It's beautiful. It's just different way of just handling their nation. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, and I will see you on the next one.